AACN reported in 2023 that we still have almost 2,000 vacant full-time faculty positions in nursing. How many of you are balancing workload with your interest as it relates to where you want to be on your academic journey? Well, you're not alone. More than 50% of colleagues that we support at Dr. Sellers Educate have shared this exact same concern. What are my gaps right now that are preventing me from moving forward on my journey to achieve CNE? What are those challenges that I'm faced with every single semester as I try to integrate the evidence-based teaching strategies? And then third, what resources do I need to help me feel better about the opportunity that I'm currently in, or what are going to be those next clear steps for me to feel better about the work that I'm doing every day in my nurse educator role? Welcome back, everybody, to Dr. Sellers Educate, where our mission is simple. It is to support all nurse educator colleagues to achieve excellence in the classroom and to also be successful on the CNE exam. Go ahead and pull out your study worksheet if you haven't already, and we also want you to pull out your resources. Okay, so you can find that study worksheet right here in the description. Okay, and it's going to be a time for you to really increase self-accountability. All right, so you're going to write down on this worksheet today's date, whatever date it is that you're watching this snapshot. And number two, we want you to write down what is the objective that you want to achieve today. Write down what is it that you want to accomplish either during our time together today as we dig deep into what are some of those regrets and rewards associated with our nurse educator role. And yes, it is aligned with the NLN nurse educator competencies. And then I want you to think about what are going to be your next steps. Okay, so at the bottom of the study worksheet, this is where you're going to see the competency that we're going to discuss, which is competency 8 for CNE and for CNE novice as it relates to the academic community. But if you're taking the CNE clinical, it's also relevant for you when you look at the role of the clinical nurse educator. Okay, so write down what are those resources. We're going to be talking about those today. And then what are the key takeaways that you want to have? I'm just going to stop the music. Hopefully you all noticed that I was playing music. That is just one way for us to increase the positivity and the positive energy that we create in our learning space for our students. So even if you teach online, even if you're in an asynchronous environment, when you are recording your welcome videos, which we highly recommend as a best practice for your students, I'm introducing them to what they can expect for the week, but also reflecting on the previous week. That's an evidence-based strategy that we like to use here at Dr. Sellers Educate for our programs as well. So think about a warm-up video, even for asynchronous classes, where you're just welcoming students to the week. And you can also answer some of those questions that have come up that students have posted, or maybe they've emailed you about a specific assignment and there needs to be additional clarity. So just take advantage of the warm-up or the welcome video that you prepare for your students every single week in the asynchronous setting. And then, of course, if you're in a synchronous setting, it's a great time for you to ask students to come to the class or come into the learning experience already engaged in that teaching learning process. So asking students to pull out a worksheet, pull out a sheet of paper, whatever tool that you want students to use to help them stay focused on the content that you will be exploring during your time together. Okay, and then the last section, you are outlining your 7-week study plan on the worksheet, and at the bottom are going to be those top 3 gap areas. All right, so what other resources are you going to use? If you have the study workbook, we highly recommend that you pull that out as well. That is a resource that many nurse educator colleagues find to be very helpful. And then Billings and Halstead Teaching and Nursing, we're still using the 6th edition as our primary text because that is the edition that NLN shared during the summit in 2023 that they're using to align the CNE exam. And then we also use Dr. Caputi's CNE review book for this snapshot because there's some content there that is very helpful, and we want to make sure that you are using all of these great resources to help you close your knowledge gaps. All right, so in this snapshot, we're going to be focusing on the academic community and what are some of those challenges and opportunities, we like to say they are, for us to ensure we're closing our knowledge gaps to help us be a better nurse educator in the classroom, but also to help us achieve success on the CNE exam. That is our mission here at Dr. Sellers Educate. We want to help you be a nurse educator, but also to help you be successful on the CNE exam. And before we move over into our Canva presentation slides, we just want to take a minute and take a look at the blueprint. Okay, so this is from the CNE Candidate Handbook. Make sure as a first step that you go ahead and print out the Candidate Handbook. Now, this is a resource that's available for everyone on the NLN website. And we want you to print it out for two reasons. Number one, the commissioners spend quite a bit of time at NLN putting this data together for us. So we want this to be a primary source that you're using to help you stay updated on any changes related to the CNE exam, either the initial exam and even recertification. Okay, so this is a great resource for all of us. And then number two is for this detailed test blueprint. This is going to be your guide, really your roadmap as you move forward on your journey to achieve CNE success and to achieve nurse educator excellence. This is going to walk you through all of the behaviors associated with each competency. And you can see with the revised blueprint, they have changed the language to domain. Okay, so, but same focus is on the competency and the behaviors associated with each of them. So for today's snapshot, we're focusing on what is the role that we have in the academic community? How do we acclimate ourselves and really validate our competency and our knowledge as it relates to our ability to function within the organizational environment and the academic community? You can see that there are 9 questions that are mapped back to this content, and that there's 1 at the lowest level, which is recall, 6 at application, and 2 at analysis. Now, we want to bring this to your attention that you still want to focus, based on your 7-week study plan, an adequate amount of time to close your knowledge gaps in this competency. Okay, so let's not make assumptions that, oh, there's only 9 questions. We know that can be the difference between you achieving success on the CNE exam and not being successful. Okay, so make sure you're still allocating an adequate amount of time for you to close your knowledge gaps related to this content. All right, so now we're going to transition over and we'll take a look at our thought-provoking question in a few minutes, but first we want to go ahead and jump into our content. So we'll be focusing on the very important topic of overwhelm as it relates to lifelong learning. Malcolm Knowles talks about the importance of us really investing in ourselves to achieve excellence and to advance our knowledge, our skills, and ability to provide a transference of knowledge from the experiences that we've had, from the knowledge that we've gathered into our learning experiences with our students. So in this snapshot, we're looking at what are some of those regrets, and more importantly, how do we move past those regrets and really turn those into rewards, turn those into accomplishments to help us be more effective as a nursing academician. All right, so what are these challenges that we're talking about? Well, first and foremost, we know that there are demands associated with our commitment to lifelong learning and professional development. We want to take some time and reflect on what are our priorities right now. Okay, so perhaps this semester, if you're watching this live, then you know that we are in the summer semester and there can be lots of opportunities for us to really reset. I know many of us are teaching this summer. I'm right there with you. But for those that are not, this is a time perhaps to reflect on where you are on your educational journey to achieve certification, or maybe even to engage in a different evidence-based teaching strategy that you want to explore next semester in the fall. So just taking some time to either reflect if you do have a little bit of time this summer where you're not teaching, or if you are teaching, we still want to commit to reflecting and figuring out exactly what are those next steps to help us achieve excellence as a nurse educator. When we talk about satisfaction, what you want to consider is what are some of those barriers to you feeling more satisfied in your role? What are some resources that you can identify that will help you feel more satisfied and have more joy in the everyday work that you are doing with your students and promoting their learning, their learner development, their socialization into the profession of nursing, and to help them better understand some of these key competencies that we're talking about, because we know that we're not just supporting future nurses in the classroom, we're also developing future nurse educators and future nursing leaders. So what are some of these lifelong learning challenges that we want to talk about? Well, first of all, Constant updates, right? The only constant is change. And we know that is even more evident in nursing education than it's ever been before. Take a look at your accrediting body standards and identify what are some opportunities in your courses or maybe even in your nursing program that are important to you that need to be a priority going into the new academic year. And we know that change is not always bad. However, there can be challenges with changes when they're happening so rapidly. Not only are those changes happening in the academic setting, but we also know they're happening in the healthcare setting. So how do we keep pace? How do we maintain our excellence in achieving these standards, these educational standards, these accrediting body standards? How do we make sure that we stay ahead of the game? Well, first and foremost is to maintain our membership in our professional organization. NLN, as an example, will have their education summit in September. We hope to see so many of you all there. I know that early registration is closing soon, so make sure you take advantage of that discount. But we want to stay up to date with our professional organizations. We often receive updates via email, and usually there's a journal associated with professional organizations. So that's one way that you can leverage the benefit of belonging to professional organization is by maintaining your membership and, when possible, attending conferences. The second challenge is balancing act. Many of us teach as well as have a responsibility for research or even for publication. And so we want to make sure that we are managing it all and that when we need help that we ask for it. We want to be able to support our colleagues if we know that there are certain timelines that one colleague may have, especially if they've been awarded a grant. We want to collaboratively work together to ensure that we are supporting each other at balancing all of the priorities that we have in our life, especially as it relates to financial and time constraints. We know that we all have the same 24 hours in a day. And when we are awarded grant funding, as an example for research, usually there's a time limit to it. So we want to make sure that we're supporting our colleagues and meeting those timelines. And when we're managing our time, we want to prioritize accordingly, ask for those additional resources or support that we may need. As an example, if we are submitting an abstract for an upcoming conference, if we have a colleague that has either judged those abstracts, so maybe they've been an abstract reviewer and made decisions about those, or perhaps they have presented an abstract that was accepted at that conference. This is a great opportunity for us to leverage that expertise and that experience with a colleague and ask them to take a look at our abstract to give us feedback. All right, so what else is it that you want to focus on? I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and I want you to do something a little different than what we normally do during our snapshots. We do this all the time during our boot camps, but I want you to go ahead and pull out your study worksheet and write down one of the challenges that you're experiencing right now in your role. And after you write down that challenge, I want you to consider some of those recommendations that I mentioned to help you move past and move through that challenge so that it can no longer be an opportunity, but you can celebrate it as an accomplishment. Okay, so go ahead and write down whatever that challenge or opportunity is for you, as well as what is going to help you push through that and move past that opportunity and help it move towards an area of celebration that you're able to acknowledge it as an accomplishment. And then I want you to put a time frame on it. Even if it's, 1 year from now, if you have a goal of, or if you've already received a grant and there's specific timelines that are coming up that you have to meet, go ahead and write down whatever that time frame looks like. And then I want you to work, when we talk about backwards design model, we begin with the end in mind, right? So that's what you're doing right now. You're beginning to think through what are going to be those next steps, knowing that the end is 1 year from now. Okay. But that's what we want you to do. Focus on the end result, which is you completing that research that's associated with that grant funding and you being able to celebrate the amazing work that you have done on your 1 year journey, as an example. All right. So we want you to take some time to do that. And now we're going to go back to our content just to kind of talk through some of these other elements that you want to consider as it relates to what's to help you accomplish that goal. Okay, so maybe it's not an opportunity that you have right now, but maybe you had it in the past, and you want to revisit that challenge and just think about what help you will need to move through or move past that challenge. And now we're going to take a look at our thought-provoking question. I know some of you may have saw it in the newsletter already. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter, head over to our website, nursigeducate.com, and you can see the pop-up window that will come up if you put your email in. We'll make sure that you're added to our weekly newsletter that we send every single week. All right, so let's take a look at this thought-provoking question and see what you all think. So Dr. Smith, a nurse educator, is faced with the challenge of keeping their teaching methods current and engaging while also managing a heavy workload that includes administrative duties, student advising, and personal professional development. They are determined to incorporate evidence-based practices to foster critical thinking and lifelong learning with their students. Based on the challenges faced by Dr. Smith, which strategy would best help enhance the teaching methods and manage their workload effectively? Now, before we get to the three options, I want you to remember 2 steps in our process. Every single question that you see on the CNE exam, I want you to think about these 2 things. First of all, what is this question asking me? Oftentimes in the STEM, you're going to see a statement or a scenario, just like with this one, and then you're going to see the question. Okay, there may be distractors in the STEM. We want you to focus on what is the question actually asking you. There may be content that really is irrelevant related to the question. Maybe it adds color and maybe it adds some context. So you want to read the question carefully, but make sure you're clear about exactly what the question is asking you. And then number 2, what is it that you know for sure about this question? All right. And if you are challenged with really understanding concepts in the question, you should have scratch paper at the CNE when you sit for the CNE exam. So you can make a note related to trigger words or any content that is going to help you when you go back to this question, because as of right now, you can skip questions. But when you go back to the question, you're not starting from scratch, right? You're able to gather some of the thoughts you had initially by making a note of it and jotting that down on your paper. All right, so in this snapshot or thought-provoking question, you have 3 options. I know on the CNE exam, you may see 3 options, you may see 4, but for this one, you have 3. So A is using standardized testing for assessment to assess cognitive learning level and comprehension of concepts. Option B, implementing active learning strategies to increase engagement in the teaching learning process. And option C, increasing lecture hours to cover more content and allow more time for clarification of concepts. All right, so what is the question asking you? And then second of all, what is it that you know for sure? All right, and now we're going to wrap up with our content. And before we end our time together, we will go back to the correct answer and talk a little bit about rationale. And if you're live, feel free to share any questions that you have. All right, so when we balance teaching and research in our academic role, it is about work-life balance. I know some colleagues may not even believe in work-life balance. However, we know that we can only do one thing at a time. And I'm sure I have multitaskers out there. I know I thought I was a multitasker too. However, we know research tells us that we may think that we're multitaskers. However, the data shows that we are not effective at completing more than one task at a time. What happens is our neural pathways, when we are trying to focus on too many things at once, we get distracted very easily, and it takes us a longer time to complete one of the 2 or maybe even 3 tasks that we're trying to multitask at the same time. There's switching that has to happen in our brain. We use different neural pathways when we're focusing on one assignment versus another assignment or project. And so that's why it's important to focus on only one project, one goal at a time, one paper at a time. I know that if you're like me, when I have to grade multiple papers, sometimes I have them on different screens, but we want to make sure that we stay focused in order to be most productive on whatever our priority is at the moment. So what does that mean? Well, it means that when we're combining teaching, grading, mentoring, and administrative duties, it does require long hours of our time. And sometimes if we don't focus on self-care, it can lead to a negative impact on the quality of our work. So making sure that when we have a lot of commitment related to grading and other duties as listed here, you want to carve out small time increments that you're dedicating to completing one of those tasks at a time. Okay, so as an example, if I know that I have probably about 4 hours of grading to do, and I also have to look at the teaching assignments as part of my administrative duty, then maybe you're going to carve out 1 hour to do grading assignments on Monday, and then maybe on Tuesday you're going to do another hour, or perhaps you're going to focus on getting the grading done on one day. Okay, so this is more about whatever's most effective for you in order to accomplish the goal, and not justify self-care, because we know that can lead to lack of productivity. The second category when we talk about balancing teaching and research is our ability to feel fulfilled in the responsibilities that we have. This is going to help us keep a healthy mental state and to not spiral into that unproductive, I call it that unproductive landmine that happens whenever we are challenged with competing priorities. Thinking about where am I at today on my nurse educator journey, and if I have satisfaction in my role. Are there other responsibilities that I want to add to my plate? Perhaps some that I want to take off my plate? What does having a conversation with my administrator look like, and what is the time for that to happen? This is a great quote that was shared by one of the coaches that I've worked with, Coach TM. She says that the past is in your head and your future is in your hands. I love this quote for so many reasons. First and foremost, because it validates that we can't change the past, right? It did happen. So we want to take stock of that. We want to reflect on that, but we don't want to stay there. We want to focus more on our future, because that is the only part of our life that we can control. Okay, so we reflect on the past, we leverage it, we take time to process the information based on those experiences, and we want to move forward in looking at how can we affect today, the rest of today. How can we affect tomorrow? How can we affect next year? Regrets and rewards, it is a complex dynamic process. When we look at rewards, one colleague shared with me that she focuses on the outcome. In education, we know that yes, we all have to have money to live while we're here on this earth. That's just a reality. However, a lot of the reward comes from the outcomes that we see once our students cross that finish line. Once our students show up, sometimes in that healthcare setting, when we need care or our loved ones need care. If you do have regrets, I encourage you to reflect on your choices. Perhaps creating a better support system with resources are going to help you feel more satisfied in your role. Okay, so some of this is going to require you, as you think about where you are on your journey towards CNE or even just become a better nurse educator. It's about you really taking a look at where you are today, where you want to be, and what are going to be your next steps to get there. Our students are best served by faculty that enjoy their work. If you chose B for your thought-provoking question answer, you are correct. Implementing active learning strategies to increase engagement in the teaching learning process is the correct answer. So give yourselves a round of applause. Great job if you all chose B. And the rationale is associated with exactly what the question is asking. So let's take a look. So yes, there was conversation about the heavy workload and other duties that you had. However, the specific question is, what is going to best help enhance teaching methods in the classroom, right, for effective learning? A, using standardized testing. Well, that could give us some data about students' comprehension of concepts, but that's really not associated with how to what strategy to best use to help enhance that teaching learning process. And then C, increasing lecture hours to cover more content. What do we know about lecture and retention? Only 5% based on data that I know is a little dated, but it's still very relevant. It was cited in 2000, but it's still very relevant to the research we see today. It's still about 5% of content is retained when we only lecture. Okay, so it's not as effective. Even though this is probably an asynchronous experience for most of you all, if you're not watching it live or responding in the chat, there's still thought-provoking questions. There's still time that you all are spending reflecting, right? You all are writing. You all may be pausing this snapshot and looking at the textbook pages to help you close your knowledge gaps. And if you are, we have a resource for you that we're going to talk about as we wrap up. But what's your score? All right, so I want you to think about, where are you on that scale? 5 being you're competent, you're ready to take the C&E exam, or you feel like you have a level of mastery associated with your ability to really acclimate yourself to the academic community. Or a 1, you're completely lost. Some of the content, you have no idea what I was talking about. And that's okay, because you've taken time to reflect on where you are today, but that is not where you're going to stay, right? You're going to move forward because you're going to use the right resources. The only resources you need to help you close your knowledge gaps are going to be Billings and Halstead Teaching and Nursing. We recommend the 6th edition if you're taking a C&E right now. The 7th edition is available. However, we know based on what NLN shared, the questions for the revised exam for 2024 were mapped back to the content in the 6th edition. If you do have the 7th edition, you can look right here in our description and you will see the actual crosswalk between the 6th and the 7th edition. So you'll be able to easily locate those pages in the 7th edition if you have it. And then Dr. Caputi C&E Review Book, we do recommend the 2nd edition, and it is chapter 8 that you're going to be focusing on. And then if you do have our study workbook, take a look at part 5. Pages 50 to 52 are going to help you close your knowledge gap as it relates to the content that we talked about today. Well, we have so enjoyed having you during this snapshot. We know it was a little bit longer than usual. We hope this information has been helpful. Email us if you have questions, info@drsellerseducate.com. And until next time, we hope that we will see you in an upcoming monthly boot camp. We will be launching a new setup for our boot camp. We will have a Q&A at the end of every boot camp, so you will have time with colleagues here at Dr. Sellers Educate to answer your questions that you may have. And we encourage you to email those ahead of time. Okay, we have our boot camp twice every single month, and we record those so they're available not only for contact hours, but also you can go back and review content as long as you're an active member. Reach out if you have questions, and we will see you next time. Have a great one, everybody.